Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Future of Biz Tech. I am your host, JC Granger, and I have another fantastic guest on the show today. And if you end up loving this episode, please show your love and appreciation by following this podcast wherever you're listening. Be sure to give it a 5-star review, preferably with a cool comment, because that is how other techies like you and me find cool podcasts like this. So today, I have the founder and CEO of McGaw.io and UTM.io, which we will talk about. Dan McGaw, thank you so much for being on the show. Dan, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what is it that you guys do?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, and thanks everybody for listening. I'm Dan McGaw. I'm the CEO founder of McGaw.io and UTM.io. I'm a marketing technology and marketing analytics executive. I've been at this for over 20 years. So I got my start back in 1998 sending mass email since before there was mass email. So I've just been around for a long time doing this type of stuff. Before starting these companies, I was the head of marketing at Kissmetrics, one of the pioneers in marketing analytics. So I've just been around the block. I've seen a lot of cool stuff. Based here in Orlando, Florida, where it's a super, super hot day today, but I wouldn't live anywhere else. So.
Well, that's awesome. It's funny you bring up email, which we're going to come back to here in a couple questions. But the first thing I want to ask is, let's talk specifically about UTM.io. What is UTM.io? Who do they serve? Like, who is your perfect client, and what problems are you solving with that software?
Yeah, so UTM.io is a campaign link management product. So basically, whenever you're making campaign links, whether they're going to be in email, they're going to be in social media, you're going to put them on a billboard, right? Any of those campaign links, you basically build inside of our tool, and then you're able to use them wherever you want. We typically, we work with all sorts of companies. So our freemium version, which is unlimited free, is super awesome. So we have thousands and thousands of users who use that. So from small agencies to freelancers to even big companies that still stay on the free one. But we primarily sell to large companies. So where I spend most of my time is working with big multinational billion-dollar corporation marketing campaigns that they need to be ultimately able to track. And the real purpose of UTM.io is making it so that anybody on your team, whether it's a small team or a large team, has the ability to build UTM tagged links so that way you can effectively track your marketing efforts. Because if you've ever made campaign links and you've used UTM codes that go on the end of the URL, even capitalization will throw things off. Typos will throw things off. So making sure your entire marketing team is using the same taxonomy, the same UTM conventions is going to be the big difference between knowing whether a campaign was successful or knowing a campaign failed.
Okay, so this is where I nerd out because I've owned my marketing agency for about 10 years now. I've been doing digital since 2000, so you got me beat by a little bit. And I also started off bulk email because, what else was there, right? There was no social media. There was no real SEO, right? You didn't have paid ads, back then. You had nothing except for what? Angel Fire websites, Rocket Mail.
GeoCities. I was all over GeoCities.
Oh man, are we aging ourselves right now? And you had email, right? And so I'm a big fan of email. A lot of people said it was going to die and go away. It never did. It just got smaller. And when it comes to B2B, there's no scenario where being able to send a message with an attachment or whatnot is gonna go away. At some point, even if you start in social media or paid ads, eventually when that relationship happens, you got to send them something, right?
Yeah.
So that platform, I think, will always be there. So I think it's really cool that you're email guys. So then let me ask you this, because this is something that we've been coming across here recently, right? Because we specialize in cold outbound campaigns, right? So with this whole change now with Facebook and Apple going at each other, of course, and fighting, and we're all hoping that they kiss and make up soon, but until they do, what is your take? How does UTM.io help with the new disabling, features for tracking when it comes to Apple and Facebook and Google sometimes too, and third-party cookies? Like, how are you guys getting around that? How are you benefiting agencies like myself, I guess, because I want to check this out too. How is that working out?
At the end of the day, the great thing is that UTMs are not going to get stopped, right? So they're not a part of Apple's intelligence tracking. So UTMs are always going to work. The query parameters that you use are still going to work. So the tracking is ultimately even more important now having UTMs, because that's going to be the only way that you can really make sure things that tie together. So UTMs are just becoming even more and more popular because of this. The next issue that people are going to have to face, and we have some time because third-party cookies aren't going away entirely. Yes, I know iOS is trying to block them. And yes, I understand that Google has said they're going to get rid of cookies in, I think it's 2023 now. But we have to understand that's third-party cookies, though. That's not first-party cookies.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, you just have to be able to step up your game a little bit and understand how to build a first-party cookie for your website. How do you make it so that your first-party cookie can relay that information to your analytics products or anything else, so that way you can effectively track? The internet's already in the process of moving forward with this. So it's not like the world is over. Yes, Facebook and Apple are in a pissing match to see who has more world domination. Google as well is in this pissing match. Because at the end of the day, the thing that I think that what I get frustrated about is at the end of the day, this is simply a power play for Apple, not to secure privacy, but to make it so that they're the ones with all the data. What you have to realize is that whoever has the most data is the most valuable. Mm-hmm. So the only way that Apple is going to be able to slow Facebook down is to chop them off the knees by getting rid of their data. So that's where this really comes into play. Apple could care less about your privacy, to be quite frank. While they tell you that they care about your privacy, you have to also realize they track every single thing that happens on your phone and they save it. They just don't sell it to somebody else, but they definitely use it for their own purposes. So when it comes down to UTMs and being able to track, UTMs are one of the things that Apple has said, we're not going to block these. These are really, really important things that everybody uses. So while you're losing a lot of the intelligent tracking that Facebook's going to offer through their cookies and their JavaScripts, you can still get the same analytical data by using UTM codes and doing your own reporting. It's just a little bit harder now.
Okay. So now I don't pretend to assume that every single listener in our audience knows everything techie, right? Me and you, we know this stuff. But, so two things. One is, can you tell people what UTM stands for, right?
Yeah.
And then secondly, the second part of the question is, can UTM codes be used if you create them from your end in everything, in all your links, whether it be in your Facebook, like if you're doing ads, can you use UTM codes outbound into every one of your avenues? So what is a UTM specifically as it's defined? And then can that be used in all the platforms that you're marketing?
Yeah, really, really good question. So UTM stands for Urchin Tracking Module. So before Google Analytics was bought by Google, it was called Urchin, and it was a really, really popular web analytics product. And it was really the first web analytics product out there. And Google bought it and then made it free. So UTM comes from Urchin. And UTMs are now patented and owned by Google because they, of course, bought the company. But they are definitely one of the most proliferous tracking methods on the internet. So anytime that you make a link and it is not on your website and you're driving traffic to your website, that could be emails, it could be billboards, it could be social media, Facebook ads, whatever. If you're driving any type of traffic to your website, you should attach a UTM campaign parameters to it. So that way you know where the traffic came from, you know what campaign it was a part of, and you can really make sure that your analytics stays organized. So, but the great thing about UTMs is they work with almost every single platform on the internet. Every single analytics provider accepts UTMs. Every marketing automation tool accepts UTMs. They are the standard of tracking for links on the internet. And it's been like that for almost 20 years. So you can really have a lot of faith in knowing that it's going to work. So much so that UTMs are so kind of prolific is the fact that even Apple accepts them. So when you're looking in your app store metrics, they'll tell you the UTM codes that actually drove a download, right? So UTMs are everywhere. Honestly, we use them on tons and tons of links, and they work with every platform. And that's one of the reasons why when we looked at the problem, we were like, listen, we need to get into this space because they're used everywhere. Nobody's doing it really, really well. There's only 3 or 4 companies in the entire industry that focus on UTM management. So it was definitely a no-brainer. And, it's a hard problem to solve. And, we've done a pretty good job at it.
So what, death, taxes, and UTM codes, right? Top 3 things in the world right now?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So on UTM code, so let's also define one more thing here. So this is another thing that people have, that I find struggle understanding the difference of. And rather than me just talk about it, let's have you do it from your end here. Define the difference between a first-party cookie and a third-party cookie. And is there a such thing as a second-party cookie?
Well, it's a good question. I've never actually thought about if there's a second party cookie, but I don't think there is. But a first party cookie is a cookie which is created by your website. So a cookie, whenever it's loaded on your website, usually has a domain and a subdomain linked with it. So a third-party cookie is a cookie which loads on your website, which actually sends its data to another website. So known as cross-device tracking kind of situations and stuff like that. So Google Analytics would be a very stereotypical third-party cookie, which is installed on your website. You install Google Analytics, you put their JavaScript on your website. When it loads, it's going to load its own cookie. That third-party cookie is basically sending its data to a third party, which would be Google Analytics. The difference is with a first-party cookie is that it's from your own company, it's your own domain. So if your domain is, let's just say as an example, apple.com, right? Your cookie would be from apple.com or maybe go.apple.com. And that's what a first-party cookie is, which means that the site I'm visiting, the cookie is theirs. It's not somebody else's.
Yeah.
And this is really, really important because companies like Facebook and Google and many, many, many other companies install JavaScript on your website, then install cookies. And sometimes those cookies aren't necessarily used in the best possible way. If you do some research, I used to be the head of marketing at a company called Kissmetrics. There was a massive lawsuit against Kissmetrics when they first started the cookie about some things that they did wrong with the cookies. So there was definitely some interesting stuff. So cookies can not only be extremely, extremely helpful, but you're always going to have a bad actor that does something stupid. And cookies sometimes can also get you in trouble.
Yeah. So is it safe to say then for people listening that as long as they're the ones initiating the tracking and using it for themselves, for their own data, then these things that are happening with Facebook and Apple shouldn't really affect them too much? Is that accurate, somewhat accurate?
It's pretty accurate. I mean, it just gets a lot more complex, right? So like you definitely, to build a cookie, right, you're definitely going to need a developer. You're going to need to know how to use local storage. So there's definitely like a technical feat that you have to overcome. And, companies like Google are really trying to figure out how do they make it so that this stuff works, because the big difference that happens now is like, and to help bring people up to speed, you basically have the client side of a website and then you have the server side of a website. And the client side is what we all see, right? When you look at a website, that's the client side. The server side is the part that none of us see. That's in Houston, right? Like that's where somebody's server is. The client side and the server side are communicating with each other as you're doing things. And the big difference that's about to happen is that now what we have to do is we have to take that information on the client side from our first party cookie, and then we can send it to whoever we want on the server side, right? So we can still enable Facebook conversions, Google AdWords conversions. All of that stuff is still possible via server side integration. The problem is you have to know how to create a client-side integration on a first-party basis, and then how do you make that client-side integration then communicate with a server-side integration? That's where the technical stuff comes in. That being said, plenty of companies are going to solve this problem when it really happens. The difference is it just hasn't fully happened yet. We have time to worry about it. Google's already working on solutions. Facebook's working on solutions. And, if you sign up for UTM.io, we don't have a lot of these intelligence tracking things built right now, but these are huge things that we are actually building behind the scenes to make it so that you don't have to worry about this stuff in the future, because our first party cookies that will help you basically create will track all of that for you.
That's fantastic. So now come back to email stuff. So you're an email guy, I'm an email guy. We both know that the ever-changing rules of email inbox deliverability, the nightmares, the flashbacks we both have right now, I'm sure.
I'm having flashbacks. I'm going through an email nightmare right now, so I totally understand it.
The trauma set in. Talk to us about how, because I know that, like Google and different email service providers and even internet service providers and whatnot, deliverability is highly dependent on many factors, but one of them being tracking links. Some email servers and service providers do not like that in there. So where does UTM codes fit into a good cold outbound email marketing campaign? For example, if you need to know if people are clicking on something or opening or whatnot, the difference between like a pixel, for example, and a UTM code. How do people know the difference between the pixel, which tracks certain things, and a UTM code, which tracks certain things? And how do each of them affect deliverability? Because a lot of people in the B2B space make their marketing, money off of email very heavily because it's more relationship based. So can you help the audience understand the difference between those two technologies and which one is safer, or are they, are UTMs getting knocked down a little bit? Like, where are we at?
Yeah, good question. UTM links are not looked at as bad, right? So you can use a UTM link in an email and you'll be totally fine. Where the problem really persists is when you come down to tracking links like Bitly or anything that's been shortened. And the big concern with that is there's these people on the internet called phishers, and phishers ultimately are sending you fake emails that look like they're from Amazon. And when you click on that, it takes you to a page that looks like Amazon. And then you put in your password and your email, and they phish like that to ultimately steal your information. And people do this with credit cards. They do this with Amazon. They do this with bank accounts and anything like that. But a common strategy for phishers is that they have to hide the end URL where they have that landing page. And the only way to do that is by basically shortening it using another service and then shortening using another service. So whenever an ESP, or excuse me, whenever an ISP, which would be your internet service provider, whoever has your email, sees a shortened link in an email like a bit.ly or any other domain, UTM.io, we have our own link shorteners, and we deal with these hackers on a daily basis. When they see those shortened links that have a redirect to it and maybe have more than one redirect on it, they start to then get worried. It triggers the spam warning, because that's a common thing that you see phishers do. With that being said, though, you can use UTMs in an email and you're not going to have problems. Now, depending upon the email delivery, your ESP, depending upon their IP and depending upon how much spam they've seen in the past, their domain, since it's going to be a click on their link, drive to their website, and then redirect to another website, your ISP is going to then test and say, hey, listen, there's this link that's in here is coming from a domain that has a bad score in regards to spam. So, we're just going to flag that as spam. But if you're working with a reputable ESP that has a good domain, right, like a Marketo or a MailChimp or anything like that, more of the big companies, they're not going to get flagged for spam on a redirection link because they're known to have a better IP address that's going to have better warning. So a UTM in itself doesn't matter. That will be totally fine. That's not going to trigger any spam warnings. It's really going to come down to, did you shorten the link? Okay, great. That's nerve-wracking. Never shorten a link in an email. I will be clear with that. Don't use bit.ly. Don't ever shorten a link going into an email. Highlight and then you make a hyperlink, right? So, and then also never link a naked domain to something different. So like if you're linking to somebody google.com in an email, do not hyperlink that in the HTML and make it google.com and then with your UTM parameters, because that again is seen like you're trying to trick them. So that's going to be one of your biggest areas in regards to like when you have these tracking and deceptive things like that. But just to go back to the pixel versus the UTM, at the end of the day, the pixel in the email is an image, right? So as an example, as a CEO, I don't load images in any of my emails. And the reason why is because it takes my computer longer to load an image in an email. And I have to process 200 to 400 emails a day. There's literally two of us who manage my inbox and we still can't keep up. So we don't load any images. So that pixel in there is what ultimately tells us that the email has opened. Because the ESP or whoever sent the email, just so we know, ESP stands for email service provider. Whoever sends the email, that pixel, if it loads up, tells their server, oh, this person opened that email. Those pixels aren't bad. They're extremely common. I mean, emails are sent with images all the time, so I'm not too worried about IPs. Those are used for open tracking, though, in your emails. And then, of course, click tracking. Once again, they click on it, they send to a redirection, and then they go to whatever your website is. That click tracking, of course, is how they tell that somebody clicked on it. But the click tracking is where people get a little befuddled on like what is good and what is bad. But really, what you just want to do is limit the number of redirections that somebody's going to have. So never shorten a link in an email, because that's two redirects. They're going to click on the bit.ly link. That's then going to send them to another redirect, which is from the ESP. And then they're finally going to go to their end destination. That is a huge red flag to ISPs, internet service providers, or inboxes. That's a huge red flag to them that you're trying to hack them or steal them. And I'm not going to, I deal with this at least 5 to 10 times a week. Amazon sends us automated alerts when people are getting phished. So we deal with these phishers all day long. And it's a bad problem. I mean, it's really, really frustrating. But hey, listen, when you're in Indonesia and you have no money and you can hack, do it. Steal some shit. I mean, that's what they're going to do. So,
well, I can't judge. I was that kid in my dad's basement hacking AOL when I was 12 kind of thing, right? But in my defense, it wasn't that hard.
Yeah, I wasn't going to admit to it either, but I totally hacked some stuff when I was a kid on AOL as well. I did some stupid stuff. I was a young teenager, so I made some mistakes.
What about so don't shorten URLs, but what if we were to do a redirect one time, a regular link, and it redirects to, again, a normal web page that has UTM? Because I guess my question is, if someone uses your UTM, it adds more onto the end of the link, right? Now, obviously, if you hyperlink the text, it's not a big deal, right? But
Mhm.
some people have only plain text emails that come through. So they see the URL and then they see the UTM after. And a lot of people, this is just a weird thing. People will delete that so that they're
Yeah.
only clicking on that. And there's something weird about the psychology of that, but it affects tracking. So here's my question. Let's say I have a good, reputable domain that's not my domain, right? Let's say I'm doing a cold outbound campaign and I want them to end up on my website, but I'm using an alternate domain to send out and for that link. Now, if they click on that link, it just forwards to my actual domain. How safe is that from a deliverability standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, usually you're pretty good in regards to that, right? Like, it's very rare that you're going to run into issues because at that point, they're judging the IP addresses that they received the email from, and they're judging the IP addresses which they're sending people to inside the email. Yeah. If both of those are pretty clean, usually you're going to be pretty good. At that point, they're then going to start looking at what is the content of that email, and do we have a lot of spam complaints about it? But usually the situation that you're talking about, you're totally fine. And, people don't like being tracked, so they're going to delete UTMs. And there's Chrome extensions which are dedicated solely to the fact that when I load a link, it deletes the UTMs off the end of it.
Yeah.
People are always going to get frustrated, but what you have to remember is that a UTM is a query parameter. So a query parameter is the way that you run Amazon. If you ever go to Amazon.com and you look for a product and you look at the URL, you will see a question mark and then many things after that question mark, including a bunch of code. That's a query parameter. They're not going to go away. It's how the internet works. So a UTM is just another query parameter. So they're really not all that bad. The problem that obviously you're seeing with like Facebook and stuff like that is Facebook adds query parameters for cross-device tracking. And that's what Apple is trying to get away from, is that intelligence tracking.
But if you forward to a UTM code link, it'll still activate it, right? You don't have to click on one. You can just, as long as you end up at that URL anyway that has UTM, it'll
as long as your website loads and the UTMs are on the link when it loads, analytics is automatically going to track it and store it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that was kind of a loaded question. I already knew that answer because we're getting, like 50, 60% inbox, or open rate, I should say, which is great on cold campaigns. And we're doing that. But, a lot of people listening don't know that. And I think a lot of people are very concerned about this Apple and Facebook stuff. And they're trying to figure out, well, how are we going to track? How are we going to track? Even my own email marketing director came to me and she was like, what are we going to do? And I was like, it's okay. I was like, all we got to do is just let's forward the domain and let's just add a UTM at the end of that. It'll reverse track itself because we're keeping the data. We're not giving it to anyone else. It's for our own internal marketing practices. Now, another last marketing question for you. As an email marketer and obviously someone who's been probably expanding your horizons, I imagine, by now, since you've been in the game for so long, how important is it to the success of any given marketing campaign to have tracking that UTMs provide overall? I mean, like, can someone just throw money at it and still be successful? Or, and not track anything and just say, let's just hit all these angles and send it to the website. And what is the difference between doing that versus that same amount of money or even half of that if you have UTMs as part of that equation?
Yeah, there's the old adage, I know 50% of my marketing is working. I just don't know what 50% it is. UTMs give you the ability to have a better understanding of what marketing is actually working and what is not. I've been very fortunate in my career to work with some amazing companies, and I'm not going to drop any names here, but, I've worked with billion-dollar corporations that have no tracking. I've worked with 10 million ARR SaaS companies. When I get there, I'm like, you guys have no product analytics. How do you even know like this is working? They're like, we don't really know. The numbers just keep going up. So, I'll always say people can throw money at a problem and it works, right? And some people are just building the right thing at the right time. They don't have tracking. So, naturally it definitely works. And a lot of big companies we work with that are growing super fast, their tracking's not great, but they're focused on like little micro sections where they can really like iron it out. But if you have good tracking, ultimately you're going to have better success because you're going to be able to know what's working and what's not. At our consulting practice, McGaw.io, we do a lot of work with companies trying to get them to clean up their data and organize their data. And UTMs are always the biggest thing that we have to talk about because marketing attribution is one of the most important parts of marketing. If you don't have UTMs, you don't have marketing attribution. So it's pretty damn necessary in my opinion.
Well, that's that boiled down. That tells me UTM equals more ROI, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
You know where your money is going, because people forget. A penny saved is a penny earned. If you stop spending that 50% of your marketing that wasn't working, and you double down on the 50% that was, you literally just doubled your ROI like that,
Yep.
right? And all you had to do was track it, right? So I think people really under value the, where UTM codes and other types of tracking, that are still working come from. So let's talk about the future, right? The future of biz tech. That's the podcast. Okay.
Yeah.
So first, let's talk about your company. I want to hear about the future of UTM.io. Do you have any, you already lightly touched on it. You said you have some cool stuff coming. Tell the audience about what's coming down the pipeline that you can give us kind of inside scoop on right now. What are some new features or things you guys are going after if they were to sign up with you guys?
Yeah. I think over the past couple of years, we really have focused on making it so that a team of people can effectively build links on our platform and be able to clean up their analytics. The big thing that we're working on right now, we're actually in the process of redeveloping the platform on the client side. We're switching from Angular and we're moving over to React, which is just a different coding language. Yeah. And we're doing that so we can make it a little bit easier in the product to basically build a WYSIWYG builder. So what you see is what you get. So we're making it a little bit easier for people to be able to customize the way that they build their links and the way that that form of the link builder is built out. So that's something that's happening like in the next couple of weeks. So that's going to be launching in the platform. But the next major movement for us is we're doing a ton of little improvements. So we work with a lot of customers and they give us like little ideas that we implement. The next major thing that we're doing is we're now integrating with over 150 different other platforms. So the big problem that you have when you build these links is like you build the links on our platform, but then you have to go look at Google Analytics or Hotjar or something else to go see these metrics about the analytics. And a lot of customers have said, oh, we want you to have analytics. And we're like, we're not really in the analytics space. We're more in kind of like the creation or data governance space. But we're building in an integration right now with a company called Fivetran. Fivetran is a big ETL company. So they allow you to move data around. And what we're doing is making it so that from inside of our platform, you can basically import in your Google Analytics data. You can import in your Marketo data, your Salesforce data, your Pardot data, whatever it may be, and then add that to your link table. Because if anybody in this is listening is using UTMs, chances are you have a UTM tracking spreadsheet. That's the historical way that people make their UTMs is in a spreadsheet.
I cringe when I hear a spreadsheet just used at all.
Yeah. So, and we're the spreadsheet killer. But the thing is in our product, we still have a spreadsheet. And the common thing that we want to be able, our customers want to be able to do is they want to be able to see the campaign that they're running. And then they want to be able to see the conversions, the revenue and all of that stuff. The problem is that these conversions many times happen in Salesforce, or these conversions happen and they're able to be seen in ActiveCampaign. So what we're now enabling people to do is basically say, okay, great. Well, you have data in all of these different places. Why don't you just import it into our platform? We'll automatically tie it together with your campaigns, the links you have, the term, the content, whatever it may be. And you can actually see the full performance of everything you have in your campaigns in our product. So that's the big next evolution, is that you will be able to pull in all of that data into our product. And that's going to be coming out in the beginning of 2022. So, but it's going to be a huge initiative for us, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And our customers that are helping us design it and build it are super excited.
That's awesome. All right, now let's talk about the industry as a whole. Where do you see, I mean, and obviously, with this whole Facebook and Apple stuff, do you see any future conflicts with other companies? Do you see things getting better? Where do you see this tracking ability? Where do you see the balance between privacy and marketing tracking, which makes the world go round? Like you don't need to see diaper ads if you're a single guy, right? And you don't have a kid, right? And you don't want to see Ferrari ads if you can only afford a Honda, right? So there are advantages to having these tracking so that we get served. I mean, listen, Instagram has got me dialed in, man. I have to not be on there because I will buy every damn thing I see because they get me. They totally get me. So that is the benefit, right? I'm only being showed ads, but where do you see that balance of tracking for those, laser targeting purposes to show you stuff you really care about and may want to buy versus privacy? Where do you see this in 3 to 5 years? Any conflicts or solutions coming down the pipeline from your point of view?
Yeah, over the next few years, I mean, it's going to be really interesting because privacy is becoming more and more of a concern. And, I don't really necessarily care as much about my privacy. I'm pretty open with all the stuff. So track me all you want, because the only reason why we're tracking you is to make the experience better, right? So I think privacy is still going to become much more of a concern, especially as the baby boomers start to retire and start to realize that they're being tracked. But, honestly, the next generation, Gen Z and all that stuff, they don't care that much about it, right? They're kind of not on it, but at the same time they do, right? I mean, Snapchat serves a purpose, right? It is privacy enabled. So, there's going to be a hard toss up that's going to happen over the next few years on which way that it goes. And I don't exactly know. But what I can definitely tell you is that I'm going to continue to get paid money, and I'm going to continue to get paid more money to make sure that I can track you whether you want me to or not. At the end of the day, these are billion-dollar corporations that are going to make sure that we know what's going on because we have to help our customers. So there's always going to be a new way that we find a way to track you. And, artificial intelligence is now helping us get better at tracking you and also predicting what you're going to do with limited information. So, I just don't think tracking is going to go away. Yes, I think there's going to be more rules, there's going to be more regulations, and there's going to be different things that we have to jump through. But at the end of the day, GDPR definitely had an impact on businesses, but we're still doing the same shit. Like, it's not really changed everybody. We just have to tell you, that we're tracking you. And if you don't want us to track you, I'm sorry, your internet experience goes down. Like, that's the trade-off that I think is hard, is that if you ignore cookies, your experience gets worse. It doesn't get better. So people have to understand that trade-off.
I think what's happening with the newer generations, I think that they are concerned about the privacy of their content and their own information, but they don't really care about their behavior, right? And I think there's a balance in there where everyone can win, right? Obviously, we want to make sure we protect people's phones so that someone can't hack their pictures that are private and take that. That's content, right? Snapchat exists because you want to send something one time and you don't want it out there. So you're protecting content. We obviously want credit card companies to protect our damn credit card numbers. Now, granted, it's insured, but it's still a hassle, right? We want our passwords protected. So I think we want our data or our information, I should say, and our content protected. But I think that where the marketers can win without having to go into that realm is I think we need to do a better job at showing the difference between tracking behaviors and likes and dislikes so that we can serve you content and things that you want to see versus tracking your information and your content that you own. That we don't need or want. And I think that's maybe some of the biggest issues with when people get in the privacy conversation. They're not splitting those two out. And it's a really big difference between the two.
That's a really, really good point. I didn't really think about it that way, but you're 100% correct. That is definitely a big delta in the way that people think about the tracking. And going back to something you said, which I think is kind of interesting, you were talking about credit cards. Like, we want to be able to secure that and all that stuff. At the end of the day, the people who are really selling your data, it's the banks and it's Experian. It's not Facebook. Like, Experian is literally selling your data all the time. And they get that from the banks. The banks sell it to them. So, like, if you really want to talk about selling data, look at the privacy sheet that you get from the banks, and they have to mail it to you like annually. You'd be quite surprised what they're allowed to do with your data. And it just doesn't matter.
That's why I was telling a couple of marketing friends who were freaking out about the Facebook Apple thing. I was like, listen, even if they go toe to toe, trust me, that's not really worth the data. Like, if you want data to be able to serve ads to the proper, like, just go to the credit card companies, go to these third parties. That there's still databases out there. This is just more of a convenient thing. More small businesses, I think, are going to be affected. I don't think the bigger businesses or the tech companies are going to be as affected because they understand this more. But I think, unfortunately, small businesses, mom and pops, and people who are just getting into paid ads, who are just doing the simple version of it, I think unfortunately, it's going to affect them more than anyone, and they need that revenue more than anyone. So that's my opinion. But all right,
I agree. Totally agree with you.
Yeah. Last question for you. Two-part question, actually. One is, what is a must-read book that you would tell the audience, like, you've got to read this book? And it could be in your industry, it could be just in business general. It's up to you. And the second part is, what is the best advice you've ever been given when it comes to business?
Yeah. So it's a great question. So the one book I would always try to get people to read, there's a book called Principles by Ray Dalio. It's a little hard to read because it talks about his biography in the beginning, but then it talks about his business practices. If you don't know who Ray Dalio is, he is the most successful hedge fund manager in the world. Their fund manages $165 billion in funds. And when you talk about most hedge funds, there are a couple billion, maybe 10 billion. He's 10 times the size of most people, right? Largest hedge fund period. And they don't even take clients. His book is really, really good. It really gets you to understand that, hey, listen, running a business is not just performance. It's also culture. It's also values. It's about building out the rules of the business and understanding the psychology of people. So I think the book Principles is really good. I believe a lot of Ray's principles in the book. So I think that's a really, really good read for anybody who's in business. And then on the flip side of that, the best advice that I think I was given was honestly from a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is by Ben Horowitz, one of the guys from A16, Andreessen and Horowitz, the big venture capitals. In the book, they talk about, at the end of the day, being an entrepreneur sucks, right? But the entrepreneurs that they invest in at Andreessen Horowitz, one of the things they say is like, hey, how did you get here? Like, what made you successful? What made you finally get in front of us? And they said the entrepreneurs that tell us that they had some great strategy and they did all these things, those are the ones that they don't typically invest in. And it's the entrepreneur and the founder that comes in and says, no, I just didn't quit. Like, I just had to keep trying. I just had to keep moving forward and I'm not going to quit. Those are the entrepreneurs that you want to invest in. So the big takeaway that I took out of that book is, being an entrepreneur sucks. And I just have to get over it. And, death is always one day away. But at the end of the day, we can't quit. It's the quitters that are the entrepreneurs. They're not the entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, businesses fail. I mean, I've failed multiple times in the past and I have walked away from ventures, but I didn't quit on the idea. I didn't quit on the project. I had a lesson I learned. I failed. So that was the one big lesson I learned in life is don't quit. And that's the reason why, I still own 2 companies today. I'm still the CEO of 2 companies today because I'm not going to quit on my dreams. I'm going to keep moving forward.
Well, I love that. And I've always said it's a trail of tears to the Golden Kingdom. There is no good story to a self-made man or woman. You know what I mean?
I've got a river of tears behind me. Don't worry.
So how can people find your website? How can people get a hold of you directly if they, kind of meet that demographic of enterprise level and they really, reaching out for partnerships or to be a client? How can people contact you guys?
Yeah, for sure. And, I would love for everybody to get a chance to get a free copy of my book, Build Cool Shit. So, the best way to be able to do that.
Show us. We got video too. Show us. I like the cover. You showed me earlier.
Of course. So Build Cool Shit. So it's a blueprint to creating your modern tech stack. I wrote the book last year. It's really, really helpful. So if you pull out your cell phone, right, what I'm going to have you do, go to your text messages. You're going to text this number, the word MarTech, and you'll be able to get a free copy. Our bot will take care of all the address and help you out. So the phone number is 415-915-9011. So it's 415-915-9011. Just text the word MarTech, so MARTECH, and you'll be able to basically work with that bot. You'll get your name, your number, all that stuff to make sure that we can ship you a free copy of the book. But if you're interested in being able to learn more about the stuff that we have going on, anybody can use UTM.io. So you don't need to be an enterprise company. We have single freelancers using the product all day long. You can definitely check it out at UTM.io. If you're interested in learning more about marketing analytics and marketing stacks in general, you can go to McGaw.io. So MCGAW, just my last name.io. We have a ton of resources, which is really going to help you understand how can you build marketing analytics and how can you take advantage of that. And if you ever have a question for me, the best place to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. I'm Daniel McGaw on LinkedIn, super easy to find. I'm the cute guy that's always hiring. So definitely go check us out. And I'm always happy to answer questions. So just send me an email. If you spam me, I will, of course, reject it. But naturally, send me a good question. Don't be an idiot. And I'll always accept your email.
I want to see your headers say the cute guy who's always hiring. That I want to see that changed. Dan, thank you so much for being on the show. And for the listeners out there, if you are a B2B tech company and you are looking to track your email marketing a lot better, or any other type of marketing, really, because UTM codes are cross-platform usable, go check out UTM.io. And if you're not sure how to do your cold outbound marketing or you need good LinkedIn lead generation, contact my agency. You can find us at infinitymgroup.com. That's infinity with a Y, letter M as in marketing, group.com. Or you can give us a call. We're based in Denver, 303-834-7344. Dan, thanks again so much, sir. I look forward to checking out your site, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks so much.